Hi everyone, and welcome to South Asia Sphere, our monthly roundup of news events and developing stories across South Asia. I'm Raisa, and I'm joined by my colleagues Shubhanga, Malan and Shweta from Colombo, as well as Aimun from Karachi and Sana from New Delhi. Hi guys.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Our main story this week will be unpacking what's happening in Sri Lanka and especially the political implications of what the shift in power will be.
Thanks, Raisa. And I think our listeners might have followed the extensive coverage on media on Sri Lanka for the last few months. So these new developments were precipitated after massive crowds poured into the capital from all over Sri Lanka on July 9th. Despite facing immense difficulties like fuel shortages and a crippled public transport, still they came in their thousands. And for me, it was just surreal to see that many people congregated in one place. There was excessive force used by the armed forces and the police in the morning, and a protester was shot and killed. Then the crowd occupied the official residence of the president and the presidential secretariat. After that, the mood of the protest completely changed, and you could see people walking into these premises, which were hitherto exclusive to the public, and people just started, having a great time. Sana and Ayman, while we were living through this and we were seeing it, I'm curious to know how it seemed to you two. Did it seem like that bleep crazy from afar?
I mean, I will be honest, yes, it was crazy, but it was it was quite powerful too because, we have been following the protests since the start and it has been, around 100 days, since the protesters have been peacefully protesting, laying down their demands. And then to see everything culminate to that day and to actually make the president who wasn't ready to resign flee the country to no one knew where. Literally felt like watching a film. And, the videos where we could see people walking long distances to reach the protest site because there were few transport options. Actually showed how frustrated and angry people must be with the fuel and food crisis and overall situation of the economy. And I was also curious to see how protesters and protests unfold now since Ranil has been elected as the president. And I think one of the demands of the protesters was also the resignation of Ranil along with Gotabaya.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. I was also interested in knowing what was the general perception among Sri Lankans about Gotabaya's escape during, what looked like a moment of massive victory for the people.
But the question is, where is Gotabaya Rajapaksa? The man at the center of the storm has reportedly fled to Maldives.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirms that Mr. Rajapaksa has been allowed entry into Singapore on a private visit.
The general perception, I think it's quite difficult to put into words. I'm sure we were all grappling with a lot of complex emotions. We were up early in the morning because, our colleagues from Maldives were giving us updates. And there's actually a really informative article that I can recommend, which lists out exactly how the events unfolded. And, we were all glued to the screen. And I think the flight he was from Maldives to Singapore, it set a record for the most tracked flight of all time. And I think I remember what Shubhanga said afterwards. It was like a high-speed car chase, but without the cars or anyone chasing them. So Sri Lankans were all waiting for him to land in Singapore because it was announced that this is when the official resignation would come in. And finally, after about 20 hours of collective anxiety, the resignation finally came. Which meant one of the key demands of the protest that continued for months was achieved. The other demand was the resignation of the PM Ranil Wickremesinghe. He did not resign, but as he took up the role of acting president, and now he is elected the president.
Yes, Marlon. On Wednesday, 20th July, Sri Lanka's parliament elected acting president Ranil Wickremesinghe as the 8th executive president, with 134 lawmakers in the 225-member parliament voting in favour. And this victory means he will serve out the rest of the presidential term until November 2024. This vote was a three-way contest through a secret ballot for presidency between Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Rajapaksa-aligned and now independent Dallas Alahaperuma, and the leftist leader of the People's Liberation Front, JVP, Kumara Dissanayake. Although opposition leader Sajith Premadasa previously announced he would contest, he withdrew his bid and pledged his support for Alahaperuma on Tuesday.
Now, for those of our listeners not closely following party politics in Sri Lanka, we should perhaps also mention how unusual these developments are at so many levels. I mean, one of them being that Wickremesinghe is the only representative of his party in the House, and that the votes that actually made him the president have largely come from his former rival party. Raisa, could you give us a quick snapshot of his recent political career and how he managed to achieve the necessary votes in the parliament?
Sure, Shubhanga. Well, you could say that him kind of getting the post of president was almost a foregone conclusion once the SLPP announced that they were backing Ranil Wickremesinghe as their candidate, since they do hold the majority of seats in parliament and the vote was decided by secret ballot through parliament, in line with the process which is laid out in our constitution. Although it was an unusual choice, as he was previously leader of the UNP and opposition leader, there was a bit of a tussle there because there was another candidate who was also backed by the SLPP, but, given that the establishment, the core group of the SLPP kind of indicated early on that they were backing Ranil, you could say that it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. Now that this has happened, the next step is to appoint an interim government, which will consist of representatives from different parties. Until then, what we're hearing is that Wickremesinghe plans to continue on with the last appointed cabinet until opposition parties are ready to cooperate and form an all-party government. And in a twist of fate, Wickremesinghe, who, as I said, was previously leader of the opposition, now finds himself having to work with his former political opponents. Post-2015, when he was Prime Minister, Wickremesinghe actually faced some criticism for failing to hold the Rajapaksas accountable for corruption and allegations of human rights violations during the last phase of the civil war. He is, of course, also deeply unpopular. During the last general elections, his party, the UNP, secured just one seat via the national list, which Wickremesinghe promptly claimed for himself. He is known as being the ultimate survivor. He's been in politics since the mid-1970s and has been a prime minister 6 times, despite being unable to complete a full term. His bid was eventually successful as he received 134 votes out of 219, which was the majority. And then next up was Dallas Alahaperuma, who was also backed by the SLPP and specifically a breakaway faction of it, who received 82 votes. As Shweta mentioned, some of the opposition candidates, notably the lead opposition party, the SJP, also announced that they were going to be backing Dallas during the vote. And Kumara Dissanayake received just 3 votes.
And what is the background of the other presidential candidates?
The other candidate was Kumara Dissanayake, who is the leader of the JVP, or the Janata Vimukta Peramuna, and the larger coalition of NPP, or National People's Power. Now, given all the intrigue, betrayals, and backstabbing which surrounded the hidden ballot, I think we can say for certain that since he got only 3 votes, that all the parliamentarians elected through his party voted for him. In his speech after the elections, he stated that there is a huge disconnect between the parliament and the will of the people on the ground. He called for immediate elections.
And if we look at Dallas Alahaperma, he's somewhat of a wild card. He started his career as a singular journalist before he was elected as an MP for the Mathura district in 1994 until 2001. He's a staunch Rajapaksa ally who was initially with the Sri Lanka Freedom Party SLFP before joining the Sri Lanka People's Front SLPP. His political opportunism can also be seen in that he has voted in favor of amendments that centralize presidential powers, as well as for those that seek to redress power imbalances introduced by opposition parties. His presidential bid also indicated that there are some internal divisions within the ruling party, SLPP, who had announced that they were backing Ranil Wickremesinghe for the spot. And Alahaperma has also consistently opposed Tamil demands. Recently, protesters have criticized his long-time affiliation to the Rajapaksa regime and asked how citizens, especially ethnic minorities, could have expected him to deliver justice to their communities.
I'm curious now that Ranil Wickremesinghe is president. I mean, how do you guys think things might unfold now?
Yeah, Sana, I think one likely consequence will probably be heightened tension between the government and protesters. You know, it didn't help that even in the process of, trying to appoint a president, Ranil was, openly kind of trying to coerce SLPP MPs to vote for him. And one of his promises was that he's going to rebuild the houses that were destroyed or damaged by fire in the protests, which caused a bit of anger because, there are many other dire needs that need to be kind of addressed right now. And it was seen as kind of an open sort of attempt to curry favor and win votes. As people have already said, one of the key demands has been for Ranil to step down, and protesters have already indicated that some of them plan to continue protesting. Wickremesinghe has already shown a willingness to crack down on the protests as acting president, authorizing military and police to act without political interference to control the situation, as he put it, after protests on July 13. Shortly before the elections, Wickremesinghe also passed emergency regulations which significantly heightened police powers to crack down on freedom of assembly, and a court order has now prohibited protesters from gathering within 50 meters of the SWRD Bandaranaike statue on Galle Face, which is seen by the protesters as a bid to shift them from occupying the space. I think, for example, some of the tents where people are staying the night is not far from that statue. So from what I've heard, it's seen as, an attempt to shift people from Galle Face. Despite this, Wickremesinghe is seen by some as the best available candidate for presidency, given his relatively better standing in the international community, and with some people arguing that he's perhaps the best positioned to steer Sri Lanka through negotiations with the IMF. Related to this, within Sri Lanka, his key vote base has historically been from Colombo, especially segments of the business community and the upper middle class, who now hope that his election will usher in political stability for IMF negotiations. It's possible, of course, that this is also a silent hope kind of held by those impacted by the crisis as well, who are looking for solutions to the deprivation that they're facing. However, Wickremesinghe will probably have to work with some of his former adversaries in an interim government. So it's going to be an uphill challenge, and it's not a given that his appointment alone is going to usher in political stability. And of course, there's also the reality of what a successful IMF negotiation will entail for the public, and how protesters will react to that reality, of how long a return to normalcy will take. There are kind of different statements being made about how long it will take. So, the reality of that is, and reactions to that, remains to be seen. But going into that is a whole different podcast in itself. Moving on to our next segment, Around Southasia in 5 minutes.
Reports coming from Myanmar states that the junta government is installing Chinese-built cameras with facial recognition capabilities. Now, this project, which started after the military took over last year, is now being extended to other cities across the country. There are fears by human rights activists that this initiative could be used to crack down on activists and dissenters who have been described as terrorists by the junta. It has been already reported that the junta uses widespread surveillance, like intercepting telecom and web suppliers through spyware to observe communications and crack down on protesters.
So many of us might have seen the news of the inauguration of the Padma multipurpose bridge in Bangladesh in late June. This is the longest bridge in the country that goes over the Padma River, also called River Ganga in India, and is expected to connect nearly 30 million people in the country's southwest to Dhaka. And it's been seen as a pride project by the Bangladeshi government because they financed it entirely from their own resources. But there was another interesting story linked to the bridge that has seen no reporting outside Bangladesh. And so this is a High Court verdict issued just 3 days after the opening of the bridge, which ordered the government to form a commission within 30 days to identify people who made allegations of corruption during the Padma Bridge project, which lasted for over 20 years. But the project has actually been mired in allegations of corruption from its very early years, with both the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank actually backing out of its financing. So the allegations are not without some merit. Still, the court's observations that those who made such allegations or claims in the past are quote-unquote enemies of the state and the nation seems rather unusual, and I wonder if this new commission, is another instrument that the Hasina government can use against dissidents and political rivals.
So in India, there were several cases of harassment of journalists and activists who are critical of the current government, the Bharatiya Janata Party. And so on 27 June, last month, Mohammad Zubair, co-founder of the fact-checking website Alt News, he was arrested based on a 4-year-old tweet where he had shared a screenshot from a popular Hindi movie to make a satirical comment. And after the arrest, 6 more FIRs or First Information Report were filed against him, all from the state of Uttar Pradesh. And 3 of these cases are over a tweet in which he had called right-wing leaders hate mongers. And Zubair was finally granted bail on 20 July on all the 7 cases by the Supreme Court of India. And there was another case of harassment of journalists in the state of Jharkhand. And on 17 July, independent journalist Rupesh Kumar Singh was arrested by the police on charges of supporting Maoist groups. And the journalist was charged with Draconian Law UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and sections of the Indian Penal Code. And Rupesh is an independent journalist and writes on issues of Adivasis and other marginalized communities. Then Kashmiri journalist Sana Irshad Mattu was stopped from travelling abroad on 2nd July despite holding a valid visa, and the authorities did not give any specific reason for not allowing her to travel. Then filmmaker Avinash Das was detained by the Gujarat police on 19 July for sharing a photo of India's Home Minister Amit Shah with an arrested IAS officer on Twitter. Apart from journalists, last month, social activist Teesta Setalwad and 2 other police officers were arrested by the Gujarat Crime Branch in the 2002 Gujarat riots case. And the charges are that she allegedly fabricated evidence to frame innocent people in the riots case and for being part of a larger conspiracy to frame the then Chief Minister Narendra Modi and others as accused in the case. The activist and others have refuted all the charges against them and have sought bail. Then an FIR was registered against social activist and founder of Narmada Bachao Andolan movement, Medha Patkar, and 11 others for allegedly misusing funds collected for education of tribal children. Medha Patkar has refuted the allegation and has also hinted that the complainant was connected with the Hindu nationalist group RSS.
पंजाब असेंबली में पीटीआई सर-ए-फहरिस्त तहरीक-ए-इंसाफ 15 नशिस्तों के बाद 178 पर पहुंच गई।
The PTI has clinched 15 out of the 20 seats in the Punjab by-polls.
तमाम ही हलकों में पीटीआई के जो सपोर्टर्स हैं, कारकुनान हैं, आतिशबाजी।
In Pakistan, the by-elections held in Punjab saw PTI win 15 of the 20 provincial assembly seats up for grabs. This was particularly surprising given the tension between the political party and the military establishment following Imran Khan's ouster as Prime Minister. The results of the election go against the conventional wisdom in the country that dictated it was impossible to win over the most populous province in the country while taking an anti-military establishment stance. Thus, even groups who have had their reservations with the PTI in the past have welcomed the results as a moment of democratic strength in the country. This also provides PTI the momentum for the upcoming general elections, and while no one can predict what the results of it can look like, as things currently stand, the party appears to be a strong contender for federal power once again. And now it's time for our next segment, Bookmarked.
So my recommendation is a documentary on Netflix. It's called 14 Peaks, and it follows the story of a Nepalese mountaineer, Nirmal Purja, and his ambitious desire to climb all 14 8,000 peaks, 8,000 meaning those which are taller than 8,000 meters, in just under 7 months, which would be a record-breaking attempt.
There are only 14 mountains in the world higher than 8,000 meters.
The fastest time to climb all the 14 was 7 years.
The plan is to go and hit the summit directly.
If I can stay alive, I can do this in 7 months.
And what I found interesting about this documentary is it's positioned as this attempt to reclaim mountain climbing as something that has historically been pioneered by South Asians and especially Nepalese. It's widely known that the Sherpas usually pave the way for foreign climbers to ascend safely, but their names and role are usually obscured or downplayed. In contrast, I think Nirmal highlighted his all Nepali team's work and efforts. Incidentally, the documentary also made the news because the music, which was composed by Nainita Desai, was nominated for an Emmy in the documentary category. But I still found that when I watched it, that I felt that it centers on, just one person's ambition. There was also some really interesting parts where, they are in the documentary, there's these interviews with Nirmal's mother and partner, and they kind of express concerns about the ambition of his project and indirectly reveal the toll that it takes on them. Another kind of underexplored topic that I thought didn't really come up much in the film was the cost of mountaineering, which can often be a barrier to undertaking these ambitious kind of feats. So it's kind of almost mentioned in passing that Nirmal mortgages his house just to complete his climb. And, I think that reveals a reason why most South Asians can't, try similar feats. I should add that climbing is also, in my view, it's often such a masculine activity. I actually used to be part of a group which did quite a few hikes and climbs. And this is coming from my experience where it was just so interesting to watch the emphasis that was placed on endurance, where we would actually give each other awards based on who displayed the most stamina during hikes. So I was reminded of that when I was watching this.
So stamina in what sense, Raisa? Like getting to the place, getting to the
top,
getting there.
Well, it was based on different criteria. So I won one, and by the way, you don't get any rewards for doing this. You just get this. You're just like, you're the winner this time. So for me, it was because I climbed Adams Peak using the Ratnapura, the King's Road,
yes.
which is like,
quite riderless.
I really enjoyed it too. but it is like more than double the Matale.
Yeah. How are the leeches, by the way?
It wasn't too bad, but it was off season. So we climbed off
man.
season. It was raining pretty hard. And one of the other people with me, their knee gave out halfway. So I basically had to drag them up and down the mountain. And that is why I got the award. So, but as I was saying, this is the thing that I feel like in these groups, a lot of what comes out is this kind of emphasis on endurance and stamina, even if it comes at the cost of your own physical health. So, but in that sense, I have to say, since we're talking about this, that it's kind of nice to see that there's some groups here which are trying to lower these barriers by allowing for more guided group hikes. And I do hope that that continues. Because I think Sri Lanka has a lot to offer in this front, economic crisis aside. And yeah, I guess I should also add we have a Sri Lankan who successfully summited Everest, Jayanti Kuru Tumpala, and another who attempted and got close to the summit. Which is, I was reminded of that because the film also talks about the hype around Everest summits and how it's become extremely crowded as well.
Yeah, and we should also add that Raisa, you're currently editing an article which briefly talks about this documentary as well, right? I mean, the article is, I guess, more about why scaling mountains became such a thing. I mean, I guess we'll have the article out in the future, but any interesting comments that you found in the review itself?
Yeah, I mean, I have been working on this article, and that's what I've been also why I kind of watched 14 Peaks. The review itself actually does touch on a lot of the things that I was talking about, not necessarily the awards, but just talking about especially how it's been so dominated by white people and without really foregrounding the effort of South Asians. And it's also kind of talking about how even the kind of exercise of measuring mountains is part of like an imperial project, which is kind of a aspect that I didn't personally know about before. So yeah, that's been interesting. It will probably come out in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this documentary a few months back, maybe when it was just out. And I mean, obviously it's a remarkable feat, and the protagonist Nirmal Purja seems like an interesting character and obviously kind of athletically talented and hardworking. But I mean, it was also, like you're saying, that this documentary, I guess, is part of this whole move to reappropriate what is the global South or the previously colonized or dominated world to kind of reassert themselves, and feels like it's part of that narrative that's quite popular actually in the cultural world in general. Although what I did feel it was doing was also, in a way, I mean, there is this kind of hyper masculinity that's kind of being associated with, I felt, particular kind of identity. So in this case, Nepali identity, but also actually the Gorkha identity, because Nirmal Purja was in his early career a Gorkha soldier, and actually I think left his job in the British military. And I also found the kind of in a way almost kind of orientalizing a particular identity for being fierce and brave and enduring and all of that. And also, like, in a way it touched on the two most well-known cliches associated with Nepal, like Mount Everest and the Gorkhas, and like there could not be more cliche kind of connection. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting documentation of a character, and I mean, my sense is that someone like Nirmal Purja might also kind of try to build a kind of broader career in the West out of documentary. And I think he actually shot a good chunk of the film and was actually quite intimately involved in the filmmaking. So actually that's worth noting as well, that his cinematic role is significant in itself. So in fact that is in some ways equally impressive, I guess. Shall we move on to other recommendations that we might have?
Yeah. My recommendation, just kind of keeping in theme with our main discussion today, is an illustrated book called Kaputukak, A Very Sri Lankan Struggle by Amal Dechekera and Deshan Tenakon. This book is about protest and civic education for children, and it outlines the current crisis in Sri Lanka, and it's about how we got here, our violent past, and the people's struggle in Sri Lanka, and it kind of presents it in this accessible manner. And I think this is a great project, and it's such an useful resource, not just for kids. And the book has some incredible artwork done by Deshan Tenakon. And this is also just one of the many examples of like creative projects we've seen from the last few months, from like protest music, artwork, poetry, and so much more. And the creators are distributing copies of this book with schools, libraries, protest sites, and they're also working on Sinhala and Tamil translations. So I'd definitely recommend checking this book out to learn more about what's been happening in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, it's like you said, Shweta, it's brilliant, and I think it should be like part of like the school curriculum, if at all, if it's possible. And looking forward to seeing the translations also come out. And
Yeah, I fully agree. I thought it was, the illustrations are so beautiful. And yeah, as you were saying, Shweta, I think it's not just for kids, because unfortunately in Colombo there is a very dismaying apathy around protests, which are often seen as just obstructing traffic. And I think that, this kind of tries to combat that in a very accessible way. So I would argue that not just kids but adults should read it too.
Yeah.
Just to get an idea of the protest movement. And yes, it's just one of many really interesting forms of protest that we've seen coming out of Sri Lanka. And on that note, that's it for this edition of South Asia Sphere. Do head to our website, himalmag.com, to see more of Himal's work. And while you're at it, check out our membership plans and support us. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
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 Bye.